Welcome to another episode of our continuing series on Pirkei Avot. We're now going to start chapter 1, Mishna 8, with Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach. And we'd like to respectfully dedicate this episode in memory of Levy ben Moshe Esther and Elisheva Yael bat Levy, and also Le'ilui Nishmat Rosie bat Esther. Okay, and now we're going to hand over to Michael. Take it away.
So this Mishnah, the 8th Mishnah, we're talking about Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach, both very incredible people who were as we've learned before, there were Perushim and Sadducees. The Perushim, Shimon ben Shetach was a Perushi. We're going to talk about him first. We know that the Sadducees were the ones who broke off and declared that the oral Torah was, as we would say nowadays, fake news. And they decided to live according to only what the Torah said and dismissed the oral Torah. Perush means to separate. So that's why they were given the name Perushis, to the Pharisees. Is the other English colloquial term. This was in the middle of the Second Temple period, and after Hanukkah, after the events of Hanukkah, the Hasmonean dynasty was dying down, and they sided with the Sadducees in their decline, and this put the Pharisees at the time, just to give you a timeline status, kind of on the back foot in terms of the society. So Shimon ben Shetach was the kind of Lord Chief Justice of the Sanhedrin, and the king at the time was a certain Alexander Yanai, or Yanai Hamelech. He had a wife called Salome Alexandra. We know her, the Hebrew name was Shlom Tzion Hamalka. I think there's a street in Jerusalem by that name.
Yeah. Been there.
And this was approximately a timeline 100 BCE. So eventually when Alexander Yanai died, his wife became the ruler of Bnei Israel. But before that, we'll talk about stories. Who was Shimon ben Shetach? He was the wife, Salome, or Shlom Tzion Hamalka's brother. And things, because her husband Alexander Yanai was a Sadducee, and he basically dealt very violently with the Pharisees. Now, at the time, obviously, this was the king's brother-in-law we're talking about, Shimon ben Shetach. He, for his safety, ran away to Egypt. He went to Alexandria, where Pharisees kind of were quite powerful in Alexandria. But at the time, I think the Roman kind of overrulers had turned up in Yerushalayim and had mentioned to Alexander Yanai, where is that Shimon that we met last time we were here? Because he would give very, very insightful and wise answers to our questions. You know, I think when the kind of the Romans used to come and have these meetings to know what was going on, they wanted him present. So Alexander Yanai had to recall Shimon ben Shetach from Alexandria. He went back with Yehuda ben Tabai, and they became the Nossi and kind of vice Nossi of the Sanhedrin. And because of this Shimon ben Shetach's wise advice, he was not only wise in Torah, but he was very wise in giving leadership advice. So Shimon ben Shetach requested assurances that he would not be harmed, because he was a Pharisee, and Pharisees were treated violently and often killed. So when he returned to Jerusalem, he it is it is actually mentioned in the Gemara, I believe in Nozir, in Yerushalmi, Daf Nun Lamed, and in Barachos, in Mem Ches Amud Aleph. He mentions the story of him returning and him saying in the he quoting Shimon ben Shetach saying, the wisdom which I will impart to you will put me on equal par with kings. And he ended up, when he returned to Jerusalem, he sat in between his sister Salome and Alexander Yanai, the king, to kind of show his equal status. So this is the man, and he was a very, very great man apparently. And what does he say? What are his words? So we'll start the Mishnah. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach kiblu mehem. Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shetach received the old tradition from them, from Nittai and
Yeshua ben Parachia.
Yehuda ben Tabai Omer, Al ta'as atzmacha ka'orchei hadayonim. Do not as a judge play the part of an advocate. When the what does this mean? Do not play the part of an advocate. You must be completely impartial as a judge. You must consider both people. You must not be partial to anybody. If you know, especially one of the witnesses, you mustn't say, I know this guy. I can take what I know about him. I'll take that as given for his character. No, you have to treat them both almost. Well, he'll tell us soon, but you must treat them both as guilty before being proved innocent.
Yes. Impartial, be impartial.
Be impartial, completely impartial, but to a much greater degree than we're used to in the West. We are innocent until proven guilty. There you are guilty until proven innocent, as he will now say. He says, when the litigants are standing before you, look upon them as if they were both guilty. The exact opposite of what we're used to in our society today. And when they leave your presence, look upon them as if they were both innocent, when they have accepted the judgment. What does this mean? First of all, he's telling you, as a judge, you have to... Look, they're all giving advice from their personal point of view. So they gave judicial advice because they were judges, or they were kind of acting as judges. So they're saying, first of all, treat everybody, even if you know them, even if you're familiar with them, treat them as if they're both guilty and let them prove their innocence. And he goes on further to say, but when you have brought down a judgment and they have accepted it, now they can be considered as innocent. If they've accepted their punishment, they've accepted their punishment, they'll go through their punishment. You have to immediately, from when you put down the law, you must consider that they are now innocent in your eyes, because they're going to accept the punishment, and that's how you should be. There's no guilt attached to them anymore. They've said, look, we've done wrong. We'll pay the price. We'll do the time in prison, whatever we've got to. We'll pay back exactly what you say we have to pay back. From that moment onwards, they're innocent because they've accepted their. People make mistakes in life, so don't hang on to don't laden them with guilt after they've already accepted their punishments. So let's look at what Rambam has to say about this. So he says regarding let's see what he says. Okay, so he says the judges, advisors, literally organizers. They are people that study the arguments and the laws until the people become experts in their cases. This is who they're talking about, as to say, don't play the part of an advocate. This is referring. Who are these people that they're referring to? These are the judge's advisors. So they study the arguments and the laws until people become experts in their cases. As they compose questions and answers, when the judge says this, answer him that. And when the litigant argues this, so should be your answer. As if they are organizing the case and the litigant is coming in front of them. And that is why they are called the judge's organizers. It is as if they organize the case in front of them. So these people must be extremely impartial. And they warn them from being similar to them. In other words, being familiar with them. Meaning to say, teach one of the litigants an argument that will benefit him, and to say to him, say this. If the judge says to you that, say this. Or refute an opposing claim in such and such a way. And even if he knew about him, that he was the victim and that his fellow's claim against him is false according to what he truly thinks, nonetheless it is not permissible for him to teach him an argument that will save him or benefit him at all. So Rambam is saying he's being particular, because don't forget Rambam was very, very well versed in law, and he understood the minutiae of these advisors, what they should and should not be doing. So he was almost saying to them, don't show them loopholes that they can jump through, basically, and treat them as guilty until they've been proven innocent.
So it's like you shouldn't coach your client. I think that's what they call it.
That's a very, very good.
Yeah. In modern parlance,
Yeah.
It's a very, very slippery slope when you start doing that, because it's when you're a judge, you're literally treading on eggshells.
Okay, so what does Bartanura say? He says, do not make yourself like the judge's advisors, like those people that set up and arrange the claims of a litigant before the judges. And it is forbidden for a person to reveal the judgment to one of the litigants and to say to him, do the following so that you will win your case, even though he knows that this litigant should win the case. Another explanation is like the judge's advisors, meaning like the greater judges. And this is referring to a student sitting in front of his teacher, that he should not make himself like the greater judges, to speak in front of his teacher as if he was someone deciding the case. So that's fairly straightforward, but we'll also do Mishna 9 to keep the zug, together. So Shimon ben Shetach Omer, Havei marbe lakka et ha'edim. Shimon ben Shetach used to say, be thorough in the interrogation of witnesses. V'hovei zehir b'dvarecha, shoma metocham yelmedu l'shakeh. And be careful with your words, lest they learn to lie. So again, he's telling you to be very, very thorough in your interrogation of witnesses, as this is very important. One story that I recall. Carry on now.
Wait, are you ready?
Carry on. So we talk about these. He's talking about be thorough in the investigation of witnesses and be careful with your words, lest from them they learn to lie. So what is the story behind this? His advice to us. He, Shimon ben Shetach, was the first person to produce Talmudic material, laws which were oral, but he codified in a legal fashion. So he was the first person to actually solidify or crystallize certain oral learnings that were made in legal precedents. He did this to ensure that Judaism would survive the Sadducees. So what did he do? What laws did he codify? First of all, he restricted the idea of divorces. He was instrumental in producing the halachot regarding divorces, gets. He basically created Hilchas Gittin, and he established this as normative law. And the second thing he was famous for is he codified the laws regarding if someone was sentenced to death. He created legal barriers to prevent people being sentenced to death on a whim. And this, unfortunately, had a reverse effect on his personal family life. What happened was, there was a Gemara in Sanhedrin where Shimon ben Shetach found in Ashkelon 80 women practicing dark arts, like witches, the black arts. He sentenced all 80 to death. The relatives were very, very upset, and as retribution, they brought false witnesses against Shimon ben Shetach's son, and unfortunately he was thus sentenced to death. But on the way to execution, the witnesses who had given false witness against him recanted, saying they had lied when they gave testimony originally. Shimon ben Shetach tried to get his son's case reopened, but his son, on the way to his execution, said, and is quoted as saying this, "Don't do that, because even if a witness recants, his son, the law was that you cannot believe a witness who recants, because it is perhaps believed that he had did this recanted under duress." So Shimon ben Shetach's son had said, if you seek to bring about salvation regarding his codified laws, consider me as a threshold to that goal. Incredible thing. His son gave up his life because he knew that his father's laws were codified, and they wouldn't be believed anyway, even if they brought these witnesses new information. They wouldn't be believed because they would be considered as brought under duress. So he sacrificed himself for the law. This was probably be the reason why he, as we see in this Mishna, he tells us to
be careful with your words, lest they learn from them to lie.
Exactly, and interrogate your witnesses very, very carefully.
Interrogate the witnesses extensively. Yes. Oh, painful experience.
Yes. So, and Yehuda ben Taba also later on, after this unfortunate incident, was presiding over a case, and he had sentenced someone to death. And Shimon ben Shetach had disagreed with him, and immediately Yehuda ben Tabai stood down and said Shimon ben Shetach has the correct opinion, and this sort of solidified Shimon ben Shetach's position as the greatest judicial expert in Israel at that time. So a very interesting couple of Mishnayot, and something to think about.
That's fantastic. This is such a tragic episode about the son of Shimon ben Shetach, but you can see how his contribution was very beneficial to the legal standing of people when they're condemned to death. So again, to uphold his what he stood for and what his father stood for, Heve marbe lachakor et ha'edim. Be very careful when you interrogate the witnesses. Do it properly. Do all the Durushot v'chakirot. Thank you very much, Michael, for those two Mishnayot, and we will see you next time, and we wish you a wonderful and safe time. See you then.